The last week or so has been pretty huge in terms of Destiny news, particularly the events surrounding Bungie and Activision Split, and of course from this stems a huge amount of speculation about what is happening behind the scenes. So in this video I wanted to jump in, round up some of the news, what this could mean for Destiny going forward. We do have some new statements about Destiny 3 and some industry predictions about the content schedule as Bungie become more independent, but we're also going to touch on a legal investigation into claims of fraud at Activision as a result of the recent tension. But then we'll talk about how Bungie are responding to all of this, the side effects of the split, the challenges, but also the potential positives for Bungie and us, the gamers. Of course, we just want a good Destiny game. So let's break it down, get more of a full picture of what is happening right now, and how this could influence the future of Destiny. So firstly, of course, you may have heard, Bungie and Activision are splitting up, so they've finally fallen out once and for all. But why is this actually happening? Well, it had become pretty obvious that Activision were not happy with Destiny's performance following Forsaken. In fact, this had been going on for a while, but despite Forsaken performing relatively well, especially when you consider the damage done to the franchise over the last year or so, it's clear that Destiny simply isn't enough for Activision at this point. Having said that though, let's remember Activision want really big annual releases, they want really high engagement, and they also love to monetize their games. So Eververse, of course, has been one of the biggest global points of tension for Destiny, and right now in the game, it's fairly non-aggressive compared to what it has been and what it could be. So overall, considering what Activision had also said about Forsaken recently, it's fairly understandable as to why this is happening. But of course, Bungie are now taking full control, and the whole community is pretty excited about what this will hopefully mean for the franchise. We are going to talk about Annual Pass, Destiny 3 and the future in just a moment, but naturally with something this big happening, there are downsides for both parties. Initially, Activision stock dropped considerably, although this isn't entirely abnormal. However, on top of this, you may be interested to know that there is a fraud investigation underway at Activision following the events of the past week. This is being conducted on behalf of investors, and all we currently know is that the investigation concerns whether Activision and certain officers or directors have engaged in securities fraud or other unlawful business practices. Obviously at this point this is all that has been disclosed, but it's certainly intriguing, and amidst a lot of turbulence at Activision this month, this can only make things more difficult, and it can actually create significantly more negativity around the Activision end of things as this process continues. And in a funny way, that actually could be a positive for Bungie. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first let's talk about the future of Destiny, considering what has happened. In terms of content in the immediate future, Bungie have said that the Annual Pass content is sound, so the next few months is covered, and Activision are part of this Annual Pass since they published it. So they will essentially have to fulfill their normal roles in assisting the delivery of the Annual Pass. And beyond that, we can't really expect Bungie to give us any real details. We can also see this in their statements, we're looking forward to more seasonal experiences in the coming months, as well as some surprising announcements. Now, if Activision was still around, we could likely expect a larger DLC in September, but considering what's happening, things could definitely be different over the next year or so. The only Year 3 insights about Destiny 2 that we've had have come from the most reliable leaker in the community historically, and on the 9, who said that there would be a Year 3 Annual Pass and not a Comet or large expansion like Forsaken. So if this is the case, we would basically see a content schedule much like what we're getting now, but considering the change, we are left with questions about the future. We'll talk more about the current game in just a moment. However, Cowen and company, who are a large investment banker, have recently predicted that despite the split, Bungie are very likely to release Destiny 3 in 2020, so of course that's next year. And there have been loads of articles about this, everyone's kind of running with it. But of course, we did see the 3-year cycle in Destiny 1, so it's possible that we'll get that again, and another game could drop in 2020. However, if Bungie are no longer shackled to the release schedule with Activision, and of course Activision wanted to maintain that kind of yearly major release schedule, considering the split, we absolutely could have to wait longer for a Destiny 3, especially since Bungie can't afford to make a mistake. All of the focus is going to be on them now. There is, however, also a lot of conversation about a more persistent live game model, where Bungie would simply continue to support Destiny 2, for example. I think one thing is clear enough, the next major piece of content is Bungie's reset opportunity really. It's their chance to say, hey, we're doing things our way now, there is no longer the influence of the corporate overlord, and it's time to set the course straight once and for all. This is pretty huge marketing material for Bungie, and it's something that we as a community are already responding to, but the industry in general is reacting to. There are even folks right now who are saying, as long as the next big piece of content looks good, I'm ready to come back as long as Activision are out of the picture. And of course, a Destiny 3 is a much bigger opportunity to do that than a continuation of Destiny 2. So while I'm sure that Destiny 2 will have content beyond this annual pass, we could definitely see a slight shift for a while because Bungie, of course, need to basically get their ducks in a row. While this is a really exciting time, it is also going to be a challenge for Bungie. There's a lot of work to do, but this is what investment bank Cowen had to say on the Activision split. They said, ultimately, we think this decision is probably for the best for Destiny as a franchise, as we think having two head cooks in the kitchen with somewhat divergent views created some issues with the development process and led the game down some blind alleys. Destiny was a worthwhile attempt by Activision to build another cornerstone franchise, one that just didn't quite pan out as they had hoped in our view. But back to the flow of content right now, and how Bungie are to maintain that in the game, whether it's this game or the next game. A big thing to remember here is that Bungie could stand to lose companies like Vicarious Visions and High Moon. These two studios have been producing content for Destiny for most of its life cycle. They are, however, also Activision-owned studios, so it could be the case that Vicarious Vision, who built parts of The Taken King, built even more for Warmind, Forsaken, and the current annual pass content like Black Armory, they could be out of the picture as well, and if this is the case, then it's a significant loss of production staff, but also highly experienced teams, and this will absolutely have a significant impact on the game. And this is part of that transition process that Bungie mentioned. There is still content being produced which could be severed and handed back to Bungie, or contractually may still need to be completed by the time that the separation is final. We can't say for sure, but it's absolutely going to be a complicated process for all of the studios involved. Nonetheless, Bungie are very excited according to reports from Jason Schreier. He reported cheering and even the popping of champagne at Bungie, and while he did say that this was the case when they separated from Microsoft as well, we do have to assume that Bungie employees, or the studio in general, do actually feel that they can do a better job now. There does seem to be a clear sense of relief, and that's got to be a good thing because, as others have said, if you were disappointed or were going to miss your partner or boss or whatever, you probably wouldn't be practically dancing on their grave, right? Maybe that's a little bit over the top, but Bungie either way seem to be very happy about this, which I think is a good reason for us all to feel positive about it as well. So guys, I wanted to break down a more full picture of what's happening right now, how this could influence the future of Destiny. I know we tend to focus on the game or gameplay on this channel, but what's happening right now is a pretty big deal for all of us. So despite everything that's happening, the question we're left with is of course the one about future content, what Bungie's plan is, whether we'll get a Destiny 3, whether they'll try to do the live model with this game. This is without a doubt a huge moment for Bungie and the Destiny franchise. So what do you guys think? Will we get a Destiny 3? If so, when do you think that's likely to happen? Or do you think that a live game model that lasts for many years at a time would be better than another full title? Let me know your thoughts about that or Activision's departure down below. It's safe to say that this was a somewhat surprising piece of news for the community, but also with the other things going on at Activision and the job that lies ahead of Bungie, it's certainly a very interesting time. So far in this video, I've mostly been presenting facts or possibilities, but if you're curious about my thoughts, my general opinion, I think it's difficult to say exactly what the future holds and how Bungie will manage this. In terms of Activision's influence on the game and whether the game is going to be better without them, of course, I don't really know everything that Activision were involved with, but from what we've seen, the schedule has been pretty difficult for Bungie. Activision initially attempting to launch a Destiny game every 2 years, that becoming every 3 years, and still appearing to be fairly difficult for Bungie. You know, I think now that Bungie can manage their releases, it could be a really big thing for, you know, the quality of the content, especially when coupled with what Bungie have learned over the past couple of years. In terms of microtransactions, I think personally that they will probably stay somewhat similar to what we have right now in the game. And for me personally, my experience with Eververse and microtransactions in Destiny 2 is that nearly all of the time I can pick up an item if I really want it from bright dust that I've collected by playing, so I don't find that I ever have to actually invest money into microtransactions in Destiny, but that's just my experience. Either way, my hope is that microtransactions will stay as they are and definitely not get any worse. And personally, I don't think Bungie will do anything silly with those at this point, but other benefits of Activision not being involved include that Bungie have no outside influence on the content. Some people believed that Destiny 2 becoming a more casual game than the first game happened primarily because of Activision. I don't know that that's the case, but once again, with what Bungie have learned, I don't think that we'll see any major shift like that again in the future. But also one thing that I'm personally hoping we won't see would be, crappy practices like having to purchase Warmind and Curse of Osiris in order to pre-order Forsaken. I don't know if you guys can remember that, but Bungie can't afford to do this kind of thing now that they're in control, and hopefully we won't see those kind of practices going forward, because for me personally, those would be some of the standout anti-consumer, kind of practices that we have seen while Bungie have been partnered with Activision. Otherwise, I think it's very much the case that we're going to have to wait and see. So hit us up in the comment section, guys, but if you have enjoyed the video, then a rating is very much appreciated. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe to keep up to date with Destiny 2. I cover everything right here on the channel, all the news, guides, and that good stuff. As always though, I appreciate you tuning in, and whatever you get up to, I hope you have an awesome day.